we've talked about, you know, your experience and what you've been through.
Yeah.
How did that come to an end? What happened?
I'd walked many times, I'd had enough, and I'd just got up and gone. But he'd always follow me, all the time. He'd follow me and he'd talk to me and tell me that it's going to change, he's going to get help, things will be different, we'll go out, we'll do this, we'll do that. And it never did. And I don't know what. My eldest had said to me a few times, because obviously she was getting to that age where she's going out and her friends are going out and she wants to go out and do the same, and he wouldn't let her do them. So she'd said a few times, you know, you haven't got to be with him. You don't need to be with him. And I think that, and the fact that things got harder, the fact I was with the kids 24/7.
Yeah.
They were off school, I had no escape, because I couldn't, I mean, he'd clear off outside and sit in his van, or he'd go in the garden and he'd have his time to himself. I had the kids 24/7, he wouldn't do anything at all. So I think things just got on top of me. I was looking after his mum as well, who'd got dementia. So I was having to do that, do the kids, obviously not seeing my family. It just took its toll. But I didn't plan on leaving him that day. I went to the doctors, I had to leave a note and sneak out the house without my kids, which was hard. But if I'd have took the kids, I wouldn't have got out. I wouldn't have been able to do it in the time that I needed to do it in. So I'd just left a note saying I was going to the doctors because I needed to get my head sorted out. Nothing to do with leaving him. I said I'd be back by tea. And then I went out and I thought, I'm not going to go the way he thinks I'm going to go, because if I do, he'll follow me. So I'd got this couple of pounds in my purse and I thought, I'm going to go and get the bus. So I went the opposite way to where I knew he'd go, because the end of our road, you can go one way to walk to where the doctors is, or you can go another way to get a bus. So I went that way and I just missed the bus. But I could see the end of our road, and within 10 minutes he came out the end of that road, but he went the way he thought I'd have walked. And luckily I managed to get on the bus and I got to the doctors, scared that he was going to see me or he was going to catch up with me or whatever. But I got to the doctors, managed to convince them that I needed to see somebody then, that I couldn't go home as they'd asked me to wait for a phone call. Went in to see the nurse. The nurse says, well, you could see the doctor, waited. They eventually gave me a private room, which was lucky because apparently he did go looking at the doctors, but it wasn't until I went in the doctors and told her things and she kind of said them back to me that I realised it wasn't right. Things shouldn't be the way they are. Things with my eldest daughter, she suffered badly with acne and he wouldn't let her go to the doctors, and I mentioned that to the doctor and she says, well, that's a child protection issue. She says, so I'm going to have to get in touch with social services. So I says, well, if you do that, what'll happen? You know, will they come round, whatever? And she says, well, they'll give you a call. And I says, they can't ring me because I've got no phone. Yeah. And she just said, you've got no phone. I says, no. She says, why haven't you got a phone? And obviously she started questioning things. And that was when she says, well, I need to ring social services because this isn't... So I says, well, if you do that, then I can't go home. Because if I'd have gone home, he wouldn't have let me out. He wouldn't have let me out before knowing social services were involved. But knowing social services were involved, I don't know what I'd have gone back to, basically. So I just said, that's it, I can't go. So she got in touch with social services. I ended up on the phone to the domestic violence helpline. They did a MARAC report. I'd waited in the doctors from 9:15 in the morning till 6:30 when a social worker came to collect me and said they'd put me up in a B&B, which then they said they'd been to see him with the children, and he posed no risk, which I said he wouldn't pose a risk because he's clever. It's all mental so he wouldn't pose a risk. But he'd said, well, she's got family she can go to. She don't need you to put her up in a B&B. So I says, well, I have got family. I says, but I don't know where they live because I've never been to their houses. And my mum's moved from where we grew up.
Right.
So I says, I know a street where one of my sisters lives. I says, so if you want to take me there first, we'll go there first. So she took me, I knocked on a door and it wasn't the right house. I knocked on another door and nobody answered. And then I heard, luckily she had a window open, and I heard her daughter shouting and recognised the voice, knocked on that door, and it was my sister's. So she told me where my mum lived and said, you know, my mum's house is obviously bigger than mine. Go and see my mum. So the social worker took me to my mum's, and that was that.
So who answered the door at your mum's house?
It was my brother. And we kind of both looked at each other as if to say, we know each other, but do we, you know, because I'd not seen him for 11 years. People change.
Yeah.
So, and I just said, is Patsy, does she live here? And he says, yeah, come in. And then obviously my mum come round the door, and that was it really. So it was where my mum lived.
How did you feel at that point, Patsy?
Relieved.
Did you?
I knew it had come one day. Well, I hoped it had come one day, but just relieved.
So you hadn't seen
I'm
each other
ready.
for such a long time?
No.
But how far away did you both live from each other?
A few miles. We was in Sandiacre and they were in Ilkeston.
It's about 10 minutes, 15 minutes in the car.
Right.
Not far at all.
You mentioned that your mum, Patsy, I know you hadn't met your grandchildren until the eldest was 13.
No.
So what date, can you remember the date that you first met your grandchildren?
It was the 28th of July last year,
And why that date?
because that was the day he was arrested and Katie went back into the house and I went with her.
Okay. And how do you feel about that?
It was overwhelming, really.
You spoke about, you going to the doctors,
Yeah.
social care becoming involved, and then you made that contact with your family, with your mum.
Yeah.
And then what happened after that?
That night I tried to sneak out of the house and go back because I'd left the kids. I'd never left the kids before.
Okay.
And I was worried that he was going to clear off with the kids. I was worried that he was going to be telling the kids I wasn't bothered, which I did find out that's what he did. Basically, he says, you know, your mum's left you, she's not bothered, she don't want you. But mum heard me going out and she came down and she says, look, we'll go and we'll drive to the house, make sure his van's still there, and then we're coming back here. So I did that, it was still there. Following morning I rang the social services and said, look, I need to go and see my kids, but I don't want to go on my own because I don't know what will happen.
Yeah.
And they said to ring the police and they would probably escort me. So I rang the police and they asked me to go down to the station, which I did with my sister, and I walked in and I just said to the police officer, you know, I said, I need to see my kids. I says, it's not a criminal offence, he's not hit me, he's not beat me up, nothing, I just need to go and see my children. Which the police officer then said, you know, it is a criminal offence and we're going to sort this out. So if it hadn't been for him, I wouldn't be here today. I'd probably still be in that house, in that situation, going through what I did. I think it was about 2 hours the interview went on for, and obviously more came out in the interview that the police officer found, wrong, and said, we'll sort this out. So it was down to that I am here. It resulted in him, he got arrested on that Saturday, and I went back to my children on that Saturday. They met their grandma, and they didn't meet their uncle. Did they meet? I don't know. They met their aunties.
Yeah.
Cousins came round and everything. I'd got family then by that time, and obviously the police were involved, and the police officer was fantastic, just always there and telling me, you don't need to go back. It is a criminal offence, and in the end, obviously, it was going to trial in February of this year, but he decided to try and keep that bit of control, and after 4 months plead guilty. Because I strongly believe he wanted to be out for Christmas, and he thought, I've done nothing wrong, so I'll be out for Christmas. And he's not.